Welcome back to the Mental Health Matchmaker, the podcast from Building Bridges Psychotherapy. I'm your host, Brooke, and this is an Ask a Therapist episode where you submit your therapy questions and we bring them to one of our licensed therapists for honest, grounded answers. Today, I'm joined by registered therapist Theepana, and we're talking about addiction, relapse, shame, coping mechanisms, and what recovery can feel like when you're in the middle of it. We also get into the emotional weight of relapse, how addiction can impact relationships and trust, and what to do if you don't feel ready for therapy yet. And just a quick note before we get into the questions. As I mentioned, this episode contains conversations around addiction and relapse that may feel sensitive for some listeners. Let's get into our first question. I've been struggling with addiction for a while now, and just recently relapsed. I never thought that could happen to me, but terribly sad to say it has. How can I make sure this doesn't happen again?
First of all, I just want to acknowledge how difficult that can be. I think most people really struggle with the experience of relapse and feel a lot of shame surrounding it. I think the immediate thought is, I've messed up, all of the progress I've made so far is ruined, and people are really hard on themselves. But relapse does not erase progress. I think relapse can be very painful, but I also think it's part of the recovery process. And as we know, recovery is not a straight line. It does teach us a lot about our specific triggers, our stressors, our emotional patterns, whether the addiction is substances like alcohol, drugs, porn, gambling, any of that is a lot of it has to do with coping, and we're not able to manage some sort of stressor or trauma in our life, and we kind of do lead to a substance. Everyone's journey looks different. Everyone's story to healing is going to look different. I think it is important that we acknowledge the relapses that do happen and learn from it rather than see it as some sort of ending to the journey or a setback.
Addiction can affect every part of someone's life, especially the way they see themselves and the people closest to them. Let's move into our second question. My addiction issues are affecting my relationship, and I keep letting people down. It doesn't seem like I can do anything right. That's a big one.
Yeah. Addictions do have a huge impact on relationships, and a lot of the time you do lose relationships because of the addiction, and that's the sad reality of the situation. But I think what makes it worse is when people are hard on themselves and get into that maladaptive thinking of, I'm the worst person ever. I keep making mistakes. I keep disappointing everyone. And that sort of thinking is not helpful. When you speak to yourself that way, it can be very difficult to move forward. Shame does keep people stuck. But that doesn't mean you don't take accountability, because accountability is very important. The only difference is taking accountability versus ripping yourself apart, which is what you would be doing when you're constantly saying these negative things about yourself.
Right, constantly saying these things is not going to lead you to growth, because you'll just feel beaten down and worn down, and who would be able to access any level of motivation in that?
Right, when you're constantly telling yourself you're a bad person, you're going to believe it. One of the biggest things I encourage people to do is work on self-compassion. Recovery and addictions are already so difficult. You being hard on yourself is going to make this even more hard. So I always like to ask my clients, the way that they're talking to themselves, would they be saying these things to a friend? Would they be saying this to a loved one? Would they be saying this to their younger self or little 5-year-old them? The answer is usually no.
Right.
So we're usually a lot more hard on ourselves than we are to the people we care about and love.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I feel like it's even harder, another layer of difficult, when you're alone in that battle and it's just a voice in your head and there's no ability to let someone else in to see this really mean inner dialogue that's going on. Yeah, and kind of exposing that, I feel like, gives space to then challenge that voice.
Right, which is really important.
A lot of people know they need support, but still don't feel fully ready to step into therapy, and that's okay. So what happens when you want help, but therapy feels overwhelming? Here is our third question. I've been dealing with addiction for years now, but I don't feel ready for therapy. What are some coping mechanisms I could use instead?
This is a question I get quite a lot, actually. And I always say with coping, there's never a one size fits all. We all come with very different experiences, different traumas, stressors, backgrounds, personalities, passions, goals. All of that matters. So even when you think about the common coping methods of breathing or meditation, that might not work for all of us. Sometimes it could actually make someone uncomfortable or feel overwhelmed if it's not a coping method that works for them.
I feel like also someone might even just roll their eyes at that if they're in the thick of really difficult moments with addiction.
Yeah. So sometimes it is kind of detrimental to throw out some random coping methods. So I do think coping does need to be individualized. For one person, it might look like movement or exercise, and for someone else, it might be journaling or music or finding healthier ways to regulate their emotions. I've had clients initially come to therapy just hoping for a coping method and for a quick fix, but then they end up really enjoying the therapy process, being able to really go deeper with their old wounds and kind of heal on a deeper level.
Yeah. Okay. I like that you're saying this point because obviously the person that wrote in is saying, I don't want to walk into that therapy space. Like, I don't want to do that. What else can I do? And you're pointing out that you have had people come in with that exact mentality, that exact idea of, I don't want to be in this space. And even they ended up feeling like they got a lot out of it.
Right.
For the client that does come in hesitant, as you sort of develop that therapeutic relationship with them, what's possible for them because they've trusted, this next step and they've moved through this therapeutic process?
I think like especially when they start connecting the pieces of, oh, this is why I feel maybe this way or somewhat really uncomfortable about a situation and not realizing why. And I think that makes sense when you try to use some coping method to deal with an issue going on. It doesn't work when you don't exactly know what's going on.
Right. Yeah, you don't have the full picture and you're probably not feeling super connected to this coping mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is important to kind of really explore with the client their past, their background, their traumas, and genuinely find strategies that can help them. If you don't feel ready to start therapy just yet, that's okay. I think it's good to read, reflect, talk to safe people in your life. And I think those are all a great starting point to working towards eventually going to therapy.
Yeah, knowing that like therapy is there and it will be there when you are ready.
Right.
I love that. Before we wrap up this episode, we know addiction and recovery can feel incredibly heavy and isolating at times. So we wanted to leave you with one final message of encouragement from Theepana.
That healing begins when people learn how to be on their own side again. From all of the questions here, I can see that shame plays a huge part in people's lives. And just a reminder that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to relapse. It's okay to start over. I think what's important is that you're working towards healing and honoring yourself through this process.
That's it for this episode of Ask a Therapist. If you have a question you'd like answered in a future episode, check the show notes for details on how to submit. We would love to hear from you.